Everyone, once again, it's my great pleasure to wish all of us a Shana Tova U'Mitzukah, a good and sweet, sweet New Year 5783. I welcome all of us, and I wish this for all of us who are here in the sanctuary today, for those in our community who are at the Chai building, for those in our community who are in the cocktail room, and for those of you who are watching on the live stream. I wish all of us, as our president said, Anachnu Kila Achat, we are one community. I wish us all a Shana Tova. The author Bruce Feiler is a fifth-generation Jew from Savannah, Georgia. In college, he discovered that he had a knack for storytelling, and so he wrote stories for books and for movies and for television and more. He was successful. He got married. He had twin daughters. Things were looking up until he had a series of setbacks. Feiler had an aggressive illness that required months of treatment, a grueling 17-hour surgery, and a very long and arduous recovery. In that time, the growth of the internet decimated the world of print, and Feiler nearly went bankrupt. And finally, his father was diagnosed with Parkinson's and attempted suicide on multiple occasions. And on top of all of this, there was the Great Recession of 2008 that gutted the family's real estate business. Things were looking great until a series of terrible turns for the worst. And so Feiler asked himself the question, what do you do when life doesn't go according to plan? For Feiler, it motivated him to write a book called Life is in the Transitions. He started the Life Story Project. He traveled all around the country. He interviewed a total of 225 individuals, in-depth interviews with people who had gone through adversity. And through these over 200 interviews, he learned the following. 1, life is not linear. 2, the non-linear life involves multiple transitions. And finally, 3, life transitions are a skill that we can master. Feiler holds that human beings became time-obsessed in the industrial age, in the 1800s, when clocks and pocket watches proliferated. And this led to people tracking life in a regimented way as well. Freud, Piaget, Erickson, and other experts helped to popularize the notion that we go through developmental stages. The conventional wisdom was that you should go through these stages, and if you didn't, then there must be something wrong with you. Yet according to research, the notion that we go through predictable phases is based on wishful thinking and puts too much pressure on people to meet someone else's expectations. Let's talk for a minute about one very well-known, predictable life stage, the midlife crisis. In the 1970s, researchers developed the idea that almost all men go through a midlife crisis in which fear of mortality drives men to behave in certain ways. Daniel Levinson of Yale University said that it must start at the year 40 and it has to end by the time a man is 45 and a half. And he claimed that 80% of all men will go through a midlife crisis. But there is absolutely not one shred of hard evidence that this phenomenon exists. A study in 1995 that involved 13 scholars and over 7,000 subjects aged 25 to 74. In this vast study of men, the authors concluded the following. There is little evidence to support the idea that most American men experience a midlife crisis or a universal course of life with expectable periods of crisis and stability. We assume that life is predictable, but it is not. And so we get confused when things seem to happen out of order, and it can feel overwhelming. Our biblical role models also did not live predictable lives, none more so than Moses. As an infant, Moses was severed from his family, and his mom put him in a little basket, and he was floating down the Nile. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, he murdered an Egyptian, and he fled for his life. Then God spoke to him from a burning bush. Talk about unpredictable. And he gave him his mission to lead the Jews out of Egypt into the promised land. And much of this we know was a struggle, not just liberating Israel, but then the trek from Egypt to Canaan, the promised land. It was perilous. The people complained bitterly and often. For all of his trouble, at least there would be one thing that would be predictable, that he would get to enter the promised land. Am I right? Wrong. Even this went sideways. Yet despite all of the adversity, Moses led with humility. And at the end of his life, the Torah tells us that he was strong and content. How did Moses manage this, given all of the setbacks that he faced? Participants in the Life Story Project prove that major disruptions can happen at any time. And Filer calls them life quakes. A life quake is a forceful burst of change that can lead to a period of upheaval, of transition, and then ultimately renewal. Based on their research, Filer and his team believe that on average, each of us will endure 3 to 5 life quakes in our lifetimes. And so I bet most of you in this sanctuary right now have had at least one. As most of you know, I had a life quake last year. I had never been ill, and so I assumed that my life would adhere to predictable phases. I was shocked to learn that I have cancer. I began chemotherapy, and I had a stem cell transplant in October. And like those of the Life Story Project, I went through a transition. Once I got home from the hospital, I gradually regained my strength. I adjusted to the schedule of appointments and medications, and I returned to full-time work. As one of Filer's subjects told him, life is not about waiting for the rain to stop. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Filer and his team identified strategies to manage lifequakes, including what they call the ABCs of meaning. A, agency, the belief that you can impact the world around you. B, belonging, appreciation of the people that love you and nurture you. And C, cause, a commitment beyond yourself that makes life worthwhile. In the hospital, I realized that I had agency because my nurses taught me that I had to be a part of my own recovery. They advised me to walk as often as I could, and so off I went with my IV pole, with visitors who were with me, and I walked those halls of the little area of the hospital where I was. I did breathing exercises to strengthen my lungs. I kept my hands clean, and much more. And I found belonging too. From the doctors to the technicians to the chaplain to the housekeeping staff. I discovered compassion, friendship, and even laughter. And further, cancer forced me to rely on family and friends, and you were there. Today still, when you tell me I look great, each affirmation lifts me up. I've always been thankful, but this scare is yet another reminder of truly feeling blessed. And I thank you. There's a story of a rabbi who bumps into Abe, one of his congregants, in the supermarket, and he says to him, "Hey, Abe, I haven't seen you in shul in a few weeks. What's going on? Is everything okay?" "Yes, Rabbi," Abe says. "I've been going to Rabbi Bergman's shul across town." "Really?" exclaims the rabbi. "I'm very surprised. My sermons are much better than his. Why are you going there?" "Well, that may be true about the sermons," Abe replied, "but Rabbi Bergman has other skills. Rabbi Bergman can read minds, and he's teaching me to read minds. Think of something right now, Rabbi. Concentrate on it really hard, and I'll tell you what you're thinking." The rabbi does so. He concentrates on something, and Abe guesses, "I know, you were thinking of the verse from the book of Psalms, 'I will humbly keep God at the forefront of my thoughts at all times.'" The rabbi exclaims and laughs, "Ha ha! I wasn't thinking about that at all." "I know," replied Abe, "and that's why I don't go to your shul anymore." You see, Filer's cause, being connected to something bigger than yourself, is humility, is realizing that you're not alone. Rabbi Harold Kushner wrote that God is with us when we have to do hard things. That's when God is there with us. I felt this and knew I could overcome or at least subdue my cancer Sensing God's presence is hard to describe, but I felt it. And I try my best to keep God before me, as the psalmist wrote. In fact, I have a mission statement that keeps me focused. My mission statement is to bring positive energy to the world through Torah, compassion, and love. This statement is my cause, my commitment beyond myself, my commitment to you, my commitment to God. Another suggestion to manage these life quakes is to use ritual, because rituals help us to feel grounded. When I was discharged from the hospital, and my aide, whose name was Arthur, who was terrific, pushed me in the wheelchair with my wife Natalie walking beside him, before we left the floor, I made a declaration that I'm sure at least some of you, or maybe many of you, have made as well. I stopped before a bell, and I made this statement: ring this bell 3 times well. It's told to clearly say, my treatment's done, this course is run, and I am on my way. This statement has been said by cancer survivors for decades. It was written by a man named Irv Lemoyne. After I rang the bell 3 times, I felt elated because this simple procedure, this simple ritual, helped me to mark a significant milestone on my journey. Another part of Filer's toolkit is to get creative, to try new things. A friend of mine recently went through a very difficult time, and so in response, she decided to take up surfing. And so I asked her, there's so many hobbies. A lot of them are a little less dangerous. Why did you pick surfing? And she told me that one day she felt like she was close to a nervous breakdown. She realized that she needed something that would force her to focus. She decided against yoga or knitting because those activities would allow her mind to wander back to her problems. But surfing required 100% of her concentration, because if she wasn't fully focused, she would fall off the board. Multiple times she fell off the board anyway, but it wasn't for a lack of concentration. Surfing worked for her because it got her into nature, it was athletic, and that challenge was invigorating. One last piece of advice to help manage a life quake. It's helpful to share your experience, especially through writing. Many of you followed my progress on Caring Bridge, our webpage. This allowed me and my family to share my progress and emotions. It allowed all of you to respond with love and support. Again, I want to thank my wife Natalie for writing many of the entries in her witty and thoughtful way. Extensive research shows that when people share their experiences about their most stressful life situations, they develop greater insight into their emotions, they can express themselves more fully, and even show evidence of a strengthened immune system. And further, when people relate their traumatic experiences, their blood pressure and heart rate rise in the moment, but then decline to pre-confession levels and remain there for weeks. Personal revelations release soothing chemicals in the brain. I've listened to a few people who also have multiple myeloma before they go for their transplant. I've shared my experience with them. I've answered questions. I know it's helping them to prepare for what they're going to face. And it makes me feel good that I'm helping to make a difference in their lives. As the saying goes, a problem shared is a problem halved. I know that many of us don't want to be a burden, but when we reach out, it not only helps us, it allows other people to feel empowered so that they can help us. So if you know someone who is experiencing a life quake, please allow them to tell you their story if they want to. Use your best listening skills. Don't rush to fill in awkward silences. Maybe this is why God created us with 2 ears and 1 mouth. Just be quiet and listen. Let them tell you their story. It makes a big difference. In our tradition, Rosh Hashanah is called the birthday of the world, in part because birth represents renewal and possibility. This has special meaning for me, because this year, on October 20th, is my birthday. I will turn 1 year old. It's a year after my stem cell transplant. I feel excited. I feel blessed. I feel lucky now that I have 2 birthdays. Feel free to shoot me a text on October 20th to wish me well. The author Joseph Campbell wrote, "We must be willing to get rid of the life we planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us." As we embark on the new year 5783, let's heed this advice. Life is unpredictable. Just go with it. Manage those transitions, those life quakes. Embrace the love of family and friends around you to help bring you through. So on behalf of my wife Natalie, on behalf of our children Gabe, Emma, and Danny, on behalf of the Pont dogs, Tommy and Luna, I want to wish all of us a Shana Tova U'Mituka. Please God, may we all have a good and sweet new year, and let us say Amen. Amen. Amen.